In 1835 and 1836, we have the Texas Revolution. Those Texas revolutionaries are fighting a war to maintain slavery. 1831, we have Nat Turner's slave rebellion, another example of slaves not being happy with their condition and fighting for their own freedom and being put down, killed, and having further laws restricting what they can and cannot do because of it. In 1850, we have the first of many fugitive slave acts, which tried to make it so that slavery would be enforced not just in the southern states, but also in the northern states as a way to pacify the South so they would not fight against the North and leave the Union. In 1855, you're going to have the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which goes and repeals the Missouri Compromise, which gets rid of the 36-30 line deciding slavery and says, we will let popular sovereignty decide whether or not we have slavery. Again, as a way to expand the country and appease slave owners so they don't start a fight. In 1857, we're going to have the Dred Scott decision, which the Supreme Court declares that African Americans cannot, are not, and will not ever be citizens of the United States, thus creating a system where one group is inferior by law to another, specifically African Americans. 1855 through 1859, we have abolitionists and pro-slavery people clashing in Kansas, creating Bleeding Kansas. Also in 1859, you have Harper's Ferry, where John Brown tried to lead a slave revolt and cause a slave uprising to free slaves. Again, for most of the timeline, we're not seeing government acting on these. The only time the government is acting is to maintain slavery and to try to keep a compromise between North and South. We see individual actions take place to try to free slaves or get slaves more freedom and more rights. The government's only role is to try to curtail those rights and make slavery more palatable for those in the South. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln is elected president of the United States, causing the near immediate secession of several southern states, fearing that Lincoln and the Republican Party will curtail the rights of slavery and end slavery in the United States. In 1861, we have the firing on of Fort Sumter, the official start of the Civil War in the United States of America, where Carolina fires against Fort Sumter, thus igniting the Civil War. We will have the Emancipation Proclamation, and finally, in 1865, we're going to have the 13th Amendment passed, which legally outlaws slavery in the United States. Slavery was not going to end the United States by peaceful means. There were too many tensions on either side, specifically the South. The southern states that had slavery were not going to give up slavery. The other instances of fighting back is not the North fighting against the South. It is the slaves and abolitionists themselves fighting back against the conditions at which they are put into. So, for those reasons, I reject the premise of your question.